The gleaming marble floors of the Grandeur Palace Hotel reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through the massive crystal chandelier in the lobby. At the reception desk, Catherine Morgan adjusted her perfectly pressed navy blue uniform and checked her reflection in the polished brass plaque that read, Senior Reception Manager. After 8 years at the Grandeur, Catherine took immense pride in her position. She had worked her way up from a junior desk clerk, and she knew every detail of running a luxury hotel's front desk with flawless precision. The Grandeur Palace wasn't just any hotel, it was part of the prestigious Sterling Hotels International chain, known for catering to celebrities, dignitaries, and the ultra-wealthy. Catherine had learned early in her career that appearance mattered in this business. The way guests dressed, the cars they arrived in, even the luggage they carried, these details told you everything about whether someone truly belonged at a 5-star establishment. From which city in the world are you watching this story unfold today? If tales of hidden tests and costly assumptions resonate with you, consider subscribing for more stories where nothing is quite as it seems. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Catherine was managing the desk with her usual efficiency when the automatic doors slid open. A woman in her mid-50s entered, pulling a worn rolling suitcase behind her. Catherine's trained eye immediately took in the details: faded jeans with frayed hems, a simple gray sweatshirt that had seen better days, scuffed white sneakers, and a canvas tote bag that looked like it came from a grocery store. The woman's hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup or jewelry except for a plain digital watch. Catherine felt her jaw tighten with irritation. This was exactly the kind of situation she had to handle carefully. Budget travelers who somehow got confused about where they were, wandering into 5-star hotels thinking they could afford a room. It happened more often than people realized, and it was Catherine's job to redirect them, politely but firmly, to more appropriate accommodations. The woman approached the desk with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. "I'd like to check in, please." Catherine's professional smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good afternoon. Do you have a reservation?" The woman nodded. "Yes, I should be in your system. The name is Lawson. Margaret Lawson." Catherine typed the name into the computer, her fingers moving with practiced speed. A moment later, a reservation appeared on the screen, a standard room booked for 3 nights. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly as she noted the payment method, a generic credit card, not one of the premium cards their usual clientele used. "I see the reservation," Catherine said, her tone cooling noticeably. "However, I'll need to verify your payment method. Our rooms start at $450 per night, plus taxes and fees." Margaret smiled easily. "That's fine. The card on file should be good." Catherine pulled out the card reader, her movements deliberately slow. "I'm afraid I'll need to pre-authorize the full amount, plus a $500 security deposit. That's $1,850 total." She emphasized the number, watching Margaret's face for any sign of shock or concern. But Margaret simply nodded. "Of course. Go ahead." Catherine ran the card, fully expecting it to decline. She'd seen this before, people who made reservations online with cards that had just enough credit for the booking deposit, then showed up unable to pay the full amount. But to her surprise, the transaction went through. Catherine frowned at the screen, momentarily confused. Still, a valid credit card didn't necessarily mean this woman belonged at the Grandeur Palace. Catherine had other concerns. "Ms. Lawson," she said, her voice taking on a more condescending tone, "I should inform you that the Grandeur Palace maintains certain standards. We cater to a very exclusive clientele, and we expect all our guests to respect the atmosphere we work hard to create." Margaret's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of polite confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is there a problem with my reservation?" Catherine leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "To be perfectly frank, most of our guests arrive in somewhat more formal attire. I'm concerned that you might not be comfortable here. Perhaps I could recommend a more suitable hotel? There's a very nice Holiday Inn about 10 minutes away." The lobby had grown quieter. Other guests waiting in the seating area had looked up from their phones and magazines, sensing the tension. A businessman in an expensive suit shifted uncomfortably, while an elderly couple exchanged disapproving glances. Margaret's expression remained calm, but something hardened in her eyes. "Are you saying I can't stay here because of how I'm dressed?" Catherine straightened, her tone becoming crisp and professional in that particular way that barely masked disdain. "I'm saying that the Grandeur Palace has a reputation to uphold. Our guests expect a certain level of refinement. I'm simply trying to save you from an uncomfortable situation." "I have a valid reservation and a valid credit card," Margaret said quietly, her voice steady. "I don't see why my clothing should matter." Catherine's patience was wearing thin. She had dealt with difficult guests before, but this woman's refusal to take the hint was becoming frustrating. "Ms. Lawson, I think you're misunderstanding the kind of establishment this is." "This isn't," she caught herself before saying something overtly offensive, but her meaning was clear. Margaret stood there for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out her phone. "I'd like to speak with the general manager, please," she said calmly. Catherine felt a flash of irritation. Of course this woman would try to escalate the situation. "The general manager is very busy, but I can assure you that I have the authority to." "I'd like to speak with the general manager," Margaret repeated, her tone still calm but now with an unmistakable note of authority. Catherine sighed dramatically and picked up the desk phone, punching in the manager's extension. "Mr. Brennan? I have a situation here at the front desk that requires your attention." Within 2 minutes, Thomas Brennan, the hotel's general manager, emerged from the back offices. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of effortless professionalism that came from decades in hospitality. "Good afternoon," he said, approaching the desk with a welcoming smile. "I'm Thomas Brennan, the general manager. How can I help you today?" Margaret turned to him with that same calm expression. "Mr. Brennan, I'd like to check into my room, but your reception manager seems to feel that I'm not appropriate for this hotel based on my appearance." Thomas's eyes widened slightly, and he shot a quick glance at Catherine before returning his attention to Margaret. "I'm certain there's been a misunderstanding. Let me see what's going on here." He moved behind the desk and looked at the computer screen, taking in the reservation details. "Ms. Lawson, I see you have a confirmed reservation." "Catherine, is there an issue with the booking?" Catherine felt a bead of sweat form on her forehead. "No, sir, the reservation is valid. I just felt it was my responsibility to ensure that the guest understood the nature of our establishment. We've had instances of people being uncomfortable here when they weren't prepared for our standards." Thomas's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see. Ms. Lawson, I apologize for any confusion. Your reservation is confirmed, and we would be happy to welcome you to the Grandeur Palace." But Margaret shook her head slowly. "Actually, Mr. Brennan, I don't think I'll be staying after all. Not today, anyway." She reached into her tote bag again and pulled out a leather wallet. From it, she extracted a business card and placed it on the marble counter. Catherine glanced at it and felt the blood drain from her face. The card was made of heavy cream-colored stock with elegant gold lettering, "Margaret Lawson, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Hotels International." Thomas Brennan's face went pale. He picked up the card with trembling fingers, staring at it as if it might disappear. "Ms. Lawson," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea you were." "That was the point, Mr. Brennan," Margaret said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of someone used to command. "For the past 3 years, I've been conducting random inspections of all our properties in this manner. I dress simply, I arrive without fanfare, and I see exactly how our staff treats guests who don't fit their preconceived notions of wealth and status." The lobby had gone completely silent. Every eye was on the scene unfolding at the reception desk. Catherine felt as if the floor might open up and swallow her whole. Margaret continued, her gaze moving from Thomas to Catherine. In those 3 years, I've visited 47 of our 52 hotels across the country. I've been treated with kindness and professionalism at 44 of them. At 3 others, including this one, I was made to feel unwelcome, judged, and discriminated against based solely on my appearance. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times. I recorded our entire interaction, Ms. Morgan. Your suggestion that I would be more comfortable at a Holiday Inn. Your implication that I didn't understand the kind of establishment this is. Your attempt to deny me service based on what I was wearing. Catherine's hands were shaking. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Thomas stepped forward, his face ashen. Ms. Lawson, I am profoundly sorry. This is completely unacceptable, and I take full responsibility. Catherine will be. Margaret held up her hand, stopping him. Before you make any decisions, Mr. Brennan, I'd like to speak with Ms. Morgan privately. Is there an office we can use? Thomas nodded quickly. Of course. My office. Right this way. He led them through the back offices to a spacious room with a window overlooking the city. Margaret entered first, followed by a terrified Catherine, and finally Thomas, who hovered uncertainly by the door. That will be all, Mr. Brennan, Margaret said firmly. I'll speak with you after I'm done here. Thomas hesitated, then nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Catherine and Margaret were alone. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Catherine's mind raced through everything she'd said, every dismissive look, every condescending word. She'd just insulted the CEO of the entire hotel chain. Her career was over. She was definitely being fired, probably blacklisted from the entire hospitality industry. Sit down, Ms. Morgan, Margaret said, gesturing to a chair. Catherine sat, her legs feeling weak. Margaret took the chair opposite her, crossing her legs and studying Catherine with an unreadable expression. Do you know why I do these tests? Margaret asked. Catherine shook her head mutely. Because I grew up poor, Margaret continued. My mother cleaned hotel rooms to support us after my father left. I wore hand-me-down clothes and shoes with holes in them. And I was treated exactly the way you treated me today, like I was less than human because I didn't have money. She paused, letting that sink in. When I built my career in hospitality, I promised myself that any hotel I had influence over would treat every guest with dignity and respect, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. Because I remembered what it felt like to be judged, to be found wanting, to be made to feel small. Catherine felt tears burning in her eyes. Ms. Lawson, I am so sorry. I have no excuse for my behavior. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I failed to uphold the values that should define hospitality. Margaret nodded slowly. You did. And normally, that would result in immediate termination. Catherine's heart sank. This was it. But Margaret continued, however, I don't believe in destroying careers without giving people a chance to learn and grow. So I'm going to offer you a choice. Catherine looked up, hope flickering in her chest. You can be terminated today, with a severance package and a neutral reference that will allow you to find work elsewhere, Margaret said. Or you can stay, with consequences and a path forward. I'll stay, Catherine said immediately. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Here are my conditions. First, you'll be demoted from senior reception manager to a regular front desk clerk. You'll lose the salary differential, and you'll work under someone else's supervision for the next 6 months. Catherine nodded, accepting the terms without hesitation. Second, Margaret continued, you'll undergo intensive training on unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and inclusive customer service. You'll attend weekly sessions for 3 months, on your own time. I'll do it, Catherine said. Third, and most importantly, Margaret's gaze intensified, after 6 months, if you've demonstrated real change and understanding, I'm going to transfer you to our corporate training department. You'll spend a year traveling to all our properties, sharing your story and training staff on how not to treat guests. You'll be the face of what happens when prejudice clouds judgment, and how someone can learn and do better. Catherine was stunned. She'd expected punishment, maybe even the chance to keep her job at a lower level, but this? This was something else entirely. "You're going to use me as an example?" she asked. "Yes," Margaret said firmly. "Because I believe that mistakes, when acknowledged and corrected, can become powerful teaching tools. Your story, the story of someone who let bias affect their work and then committed to real change, can help prevent this from happening elsewhere." Catherine felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about saving her job. This was about taking responsibility and turning her failure into something meaningful. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes or no," Margaret replied. "Because if you accept these conditions, I'll be watching you very closely. Any hint that you haven't learned from this, any sign that you're going through the motions without genuine change, and you'll be terminated immediately. This is a one-time offer for redemption, Ms. Morgan. Don't waste it." Catherine straightened in her chair, meeting Margaret's eyes with a newfound resolve. "Yes. I accept. All of it. And I promise you, I won't let you down. This has been the most humbling experience of my life, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from it and help others avoid making the same mistakes." Margaret nodded, standing up. "Good. Report to Mr. Brennan tomorrow morning. He'll have your new assignment and schedule ready. And Ms. Morgan?" "Yes, ma'am. Welcome to the real work of hospitality. It's not about marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It's about treating every human being who walks through that door with dignity and respect. Never forget that again." 6 months later, Catherine Morgan stood in a conference room at the Sterling Hotel's corporate headquarters, facing a room full of hotel managers from across the country. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a photograph of herself from that day 6 months ago, standing behind the reception desk at the Grandeur Palace, looking polished and professional. "This is who I was," Catherine began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Senior reception manager at one of our flagship properties. 8 years of experience. Pride in my work. And completely blind to my own prejudices." She clicked to the next slide, a photograph of Margaret Lawson in her worn jeans and sweatshirt. "This is the woman I turned away from my hotel. I judged her, dismissed her, and suggested she would be more comfortable at a budget hotel down the street. I did all of this based solely on her appearance." A murmur went through the room. Some of the managers shifted uncomfortably. Catherine continued, "What I didn't know, what I should never have needed to know, is that this woman is Margaret Lawson, our CEO. But here's the critical point, it shouldn't have mattered who she was. Every guest deserves the same respect, the same courtesy, the same dignity." Over the next hour, Catherine shared her story in painful detail. She didn't spare herself or make excuses. She showed the video of her interaction with Margaret, letting the managers see and hear exactly what she'd said and how she'd said it. She saw recognition in some of their faces, people who had perhaps said or thought similar things in their own careers. "The easy lesson here," Catherine said as she neared the end of her presentation, "is, don't judge a book by its cover, or, you never know who someone might be. But that's not good enough. The real lesson is that it doesn't matter who someone is. Whether they're a CEO or a minimum wage worker, whether they're dressed in designer clothes or thrift store finds, they deserve to be treated with respect." She clicked to her final slide, the Sterling Hotel's mission statement, with one phrase highlighted, "Hospitality for all." "I almost lost everything because I forgot what these words mean," Catherine said quietly. "Don't make the same mistake I did. Because the cost isn't just to your career, it's to your humanity." The room erupted in applause. After the presentation, several managers approached Catherine to thank her for her honesty. One older man, the manager of a Sterling property in Atlanta, shook her hand firmly. "That took real courage, young lady. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I can't say I've never made similar judgments. You've given me a lot to think about. As the room emptied, Margaret Lawson approached from where she'd been standing in the back. Catherine hadn't known she was there, and she felt a familiar flutter of nerves. "Ms. Lawson," Catherine said, "I didn't know you were here." Margaret smiled, a real, warm smile that Catherine had rarely seen. "I try to attend as many of these sessions as possible." "You did well today, Catherine. Better than well, actually. You were honest, vulnerable, and clear about what you learned. That's exactly what our managers need to hear." "Thank you," Catherine said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I meant every word. These past 6 months have changed me in ways I didn't expect." Margaret nodded. "I know. I've been reading your supervisor's reports. You've exceeded every expectation we set for you." She paused, then continued, "I think it's time we discussed your next step." Catherine's eyes widened. "My next step?" "Your 6-month probation is over as of next week," Margaret said. "You've completed all the required training with exceptional marks. You've worked diligently in your demoted position without complaint. And now you've delivered your first training presentation to rave reviews." She pulled out an envelope from her briefcase. "This is an offer to join our corporate training department permanently, as the Director of Inclusive Hospitality Initiatives. You'll be responsible for developing and implementing bias training across all our properties globally." Catherine's hands shook as she took the envelope. "Director? But I was just. I mean, 6 months ago I was." "6 months ago, you made a serious mistake," Margaret said firmly. "But you took responsibility for it, did the hard work of real change, and now you're in a position to help prevent others from making the same mistake. That's what redemption looks like, Catherine. Not just saying sorry, but doing the work to make things better." 1 year after that fateful day at the Grandeur Palace reception desk, Catherine Morgan traveled to Sterling Hotel's properties in 12 countries. She told her story to thousands of employees, sharing the video that had nearly ended her career and the lessons she'd learned from her failure. But the work went beyond just telling her story. Catherine had developed comprehensive training programs that addressed unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and the true meaning of hospitality. She worked with Sterling's HR department to revise hiring practices, ensuring that diversity and inclusion were prioritized at every level. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. Catherine had confronted parts of herself she'd never wanted to acknowledge. She'd examined her assumptions, her prejudices, and the subtle ways she'd judged people throughout her life. It was uncomfortable, painful work, but it was also liberating. On the 1-year anniversary of her encounter with Margaret, Catherine found herself back at the Grandeur Palace, invited to speak to the staff she'd once worked alongside. As she stood in the lobby where it had all happened, she saw Thomas Brennan approaching. "Catherine," he said warmly, extending his hand. "It's good to have you back. The whole team is excited to hear you speak." Catherine shook his hand, smiling. "It's strange being back here. I have so many memories of this place, and not all of them are comfortable." "Growth rarely is," Thomas replied. "But look at what you've accomplished. You've become one of the most respected voices in our company on issues of inclusion and equity. You've turned your worst moment into something truly valuable." That evening, Catherine stood before the Grandeur Palace staff and told her story once more. But this time, she did it in the very spot where she'd turned Margaret Lawson away. She pointed to the marble counter where Margaret had placed her business card. "I stood right here," Catherine said, "and let my prejudices destroy what should have been a simple check-in. I made assumptions. I judged. I failed at the most basic requirement of hospitality." She looked around at the familiar faces, some who had witnessed her humiliation a year ago, others who were new. "But here's what I learned: failure doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of something better, if you're willing to do the hard work of real change." After the presentation, several employees approached Catherine to share their own stories and struggles with bias. A young front desk clerk named Ahmad confided that he'd caught himself making similar judgments about guests and was working to overcome them. An older housekeeper named Rosa shared that she'd experienced discrimination countless times in her career and was grateful someone was finally addressing it. As Catherine prepared to leave the Grandeur that evening, she stood once more at the reception desk where it had all begun. She thought about the woman she'd been, confident in her prejudices, certain of her right to judge, and the woman she'd become. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Heard your presentation went well. Proud of you, Catherine. This is what transformation looks like." Catherine smiled and typed back, "Thank you for not giving up on me. You changed my life." As she walked out through the gleaming lobby, past the crystal chandeliers and marble floors, Catherine understood something fundamental. True luxury wasn't about thread counts or expensive furnishings. It was about making every person who walked through those doors feel valued, respected, and welcome. That was the lesson she'd learned the hard way. And it was the lesson she would spend the rest of her career teaching others. Because sometimes the people who fall the hardest are the ones who climb back up with the most to teach. And sometimes, the worst mistake of your life becomes the catalyst for your life's most meaningful work. 3 years after the incident, Catherine Morgan stood on a stage at a national hospitality conference, accepting an award for Outstanding Achievement in Diversity and Inclusion Training. In the audience sat Margaret Lawson, applauding with genuine pride. The waitress who had judged a CEO by her clothes had become the director who taught thousands not to make the same mistake. And the CEO who could have simply fired an employee had created something far more valuable, a living example of what real redemption looks like. Because in the end, the best hotel service isn't about 5-star ratings or luxury amenities. It's about seeing the humanity in every person who walks through your doors. And that lesson is priceless.